The Miami courthouse buzzed with its usual Monday morning energy as Judge Sarah Mitchell prepared for another busy day. Her chambers felt especially warm despite the humming air conditioning, prompting her to adjust her black robe before entering courtroom 7A at 45. She had earned her reputation as one of the city's most respected jurists, known for her fair rulings and compassionate approach. The clerk handed her the day's docket, and Sarah scanned the list of cases, mostly routine matters, petty theft, minor disputes, and traffic violations. She took her seat at the bench, nodding to the bailiff to begin the proceedings. Case number 2024 CR 789, State of Florida versus Marcus Thompson, the clerk announced. Sarah's hand froze mid-signature. That name. It triggered something in her memory, but surely it couldn't be. She looked up slowly, her breath catching as her eyes met the defendant's. Those eyes. She would recognize them anywhere. Warm brown with tiny gold flecks, the same eyes that had looked at her with such tenderness during their senior prom in Detroit, 1996. Marcus Thompson, her first love, stood before her in an orange jumpsuit, his once athletic frame still proud despite the circumstances. The courtroom continued its normal rhythm, but Sarah felt transported through time. The wall clock's ticking seemed to fade as memories flitted back. Shared lunches under the oak tree at Northern High, secret notes passed in Ms. Peterson's English class, innocent kisses behind the gymnasium. Marcus showed no sign of recognition, his eyes downcast now. The years had left their mark, silver threading through his temples, lines etched around his mouth, but his essential features remained unchanged. His hands, once so skilled with a basketball, were clasped firmly in front of him. The prosecutor began reading the charges, his voice cutting through Sarah's reverie. Your Honor, Mr. Thompson is charged with theft under $500 from Wilson's Grocery on Ocean Drive. Sarah's judicial training kicked in, forcing her to focus on the present moment. Her personal history with the defendant created an immediate conflict of interest. She couldn't preside over this case, that much was clear. Yet something deeper than legal ethics tugged at her conscience. What circumstances had brought Marcus, once destined for a basketball scholarship at Michigan State, to this point? Counsel approached the bench. Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite her internal turmoil. As the attorney stepped forward, she caught another glimpse of Marcus. A small scar above his right eyebrow was new, a story she didn't know, from a life lived in the 28 years since they'd last seen each other. The weight of her robe, her responsibility, and their shared history pressed down on her shoulders. In this moment, she was no longer just Sarah, the girl who had spent countless hours dreaming of a future with Marcus. She was Judge Mitchell, bound by oath to uphold justice. Yet as she prepared to recuse herself, she knew this case would challenge her in ways law school never prepared her for. Detroit summers were painted in shades of hope and young love back in 1996. Sarah closed her eyes in her chambers, memories washing over her like warm rain. Every Friday night, Marcus would wait outside her house in his uncle's borrowed Chevrolet, ready to teach her basketball at the neighborhood court. Keep your elbow in, eyes on the rim, he'd say, standing behind her, guiding her shooting form. His touch was always gentle, respectful. Sarah wasn't just the preacher's daughter to him. She was his equal, his confidant, his future. Marcus had been the star of Northern High's basketball team, breaking school records and attracting scouts from major universities. His dream of playing for Michigan State seemed within reach. Sarah remembered how his face would light up talking about Magic Johnson, his idol, and how he'd play in the NBA one day. But life had other plans. 3 months before graduation, Marcus's father suffered a fatal heart attack at the factory. Sarah still remembered that phone call, Marcus's voice cracking as he shared the news. Everything changed after that night. Instead of accepting the scholarship, Marcus took over his father's position at the auto plant to support his mother and 3 younger siblings. He'd hand over his entire paycheck to his mother, keeping just enough for gas money to drive Sarah to their favorite spot by Belle Isle. Sometimes life chooses for you, he told her the night before she left for Howard University. They sat in his car, watching the Detroit River flow past. But you, Sarah Mitchell, you're going to be somebody great. Those words echoed in her mind now as she sat in her chambers, staring at his case file. The last time she'd seen him was the morning she left for college. They'd promised to write, to stay in touch, but life's currents pulled them in different directions. Through mutual friends, she'd heard he joined the military after his mother recovered from cancer. The auto plant had closed anyway, like many others in Detroit, but after that, Marcus Thompson had disappeared from her radar. Sarah touched the small photo in her desk drawer, their senior prom picture. She was wearing a blue dress, her braids adorned with silver clips. Marcus stood proud in his rented tuxedo, his arm around her waist, both of them beaming with the certainty that life would unfold exactly as they planned. Now here they were, 28 years later, in her courtroom. The boy who taught her to shoot hoops was now a defendant, and she, the girl who once dreamed of becoming a lawyer while watching Law and Order reruns with him, sat on the bench. "Your Honor?" Her clerk's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Judge Reynolds can take the Thompson case this afternoon." Sarah nodded, composing herself, but she knew this wasn't the end of their story, just another unexpected chapter. The courtroom fell silent as Marcus's story unfolded before the new judge. Sarah sat in the back row, no longer in her robes but dressed in a simple blue suit, listening intently to every word. "Your Honor," Marcus's public defender began, "my client took 4 bags of groceries from Wilson's, valued at $478. But there's more to this story than simple theft. The evidence revealed that every item taken was non-perishable food: canned goods, rice, pasta, and protein bars. Security footage showed Marcus loading them into a van marked with a hand-painted sign, Veterans Haven. A Marine Corps major testified next, confirming Marcus's distinguished service record. 3 tours overseas, a Purple Heart, and countless lives saved as a field medic. The major's voice filled with respect as he described how Marcus had carried an injured soldier 3 miles under heavy fire. Then came the veterans themselves. Despite Marcus's protests, 5 former service members entered the courtroom. Each told similar stories, how they found themselves sleeping under bridges until Marcus offered them shelter in his warehouse. How he'd share his own meals when supplies ran low. How he'd spend nights helping them through PTSD episodes, drawing from his own experiences. "He saved my life twice," one veteran testified, his voice breaking. "Once in Afghanistan, and again here in Miami, when I had nowhere else to go." Sarah watched Marcus's face as each person spoke. He remained stoic, but she recognized that subtle clench of his jaw, the same expression he'd worn when trying not to show emotion during their goodbye years ago. The prosecutor's tone shifted noticeably. The security footage revealed something else. Marcus had attempted to pay for the groceries first. His card declined multiple times before he made the desperate decision to take them. The night he took those groceries, another veteran testified, "We had 15 guys at the shelter. 3 new ones had arrived that day, hadn't eaten in 2 days. Marcus gave them his own dinner." The evidence painted a picture not of greed or malice, but of a man driven by the same sense of duty that had guided him since youth, first to his family in Detroit, then to his country in war, and now to his fellow veterans in peace. Sarah noticed how Marcus's shoulders, once squared with athletic pride, now carried invisible weights, yet his eyes, when they met hers briefly across the courtroom, still held that same unwavering determination she remembered from their youth, the look that said, "Sometimes life chooses for you, but you still choose what to do about it." After hours, Sarah drove her sit-in through downtown Miami, following the directions she discreetly obtained from the court records. The warehouse district loomed ahead, streetlights casting long shadows across empty loading docks. She found the building, a weathered 2-story structure with faded brick walls. A simple wooden sign read Veterans Haven. Her headlights illuminated a handful of men sitting outside, their postures military straight despite their civilian clothes. Through her car window, she observed the scene. A line was forming at the side entrance, where Marcus stood distributing brown paper bags. He moved with purpose, greeting each person by name, asking about their medical appointments, job interviews, or family connections. Sarah stepped out, heels clicking against concrete. The security light caught her professional attire, so different from the environment around her. Several veterans nodded respectfully as she approached. Inside, The warehouse had been transformed. Military precision was evident in the organization. Neat rows of cots, carefully labeled storage bins, a small medical station. Posted schedules showed therapy sessions, job training workshops, and AA meetings. The kitchen area was sparse but spotless. Sarah noted the nearly empty pantry, understanding now why Marcus had resorted to theft. A bulletin board displayed job listings, housing options, and success stories, photos of veterans who'd found apartments or reunited with family. An older veteran approached her, introducing himself as Sergeant Mike Peterson. "You must be the judge Marcus mentioned," he said quietly. "He told us you were fair, said you'd understand why he did it." Sarah's throat tightened. Even after all these years, Marcus still believed in her sense of justice. She learned that Marcus slept on a cot in the corner, giving up the office space for counseling sessions. His military pension went entirely to shelter supplies. He worked night security at a nearby hotel, catching sleep in 2-hour increments between helping residents. The sound of laughter drew her attention. In a small common area, Marcus sat with 3 younger veterans, teaching them to play chess, the same patient teaching voice he used with her on the basketball court decades ago. As she left the warehouse that night, Sarah understood that the true story wasn't about a theft or a courtroom reunion. It was about a man who'd never stopped serving others, who'd found his purpose in lifting up those society had forgotten. Sarah spent the next week gathering intel on Marcus's operation through her network. His military records painted a picture of sacrifice, 20 years of service, medals for valor, and a pension of $3,200 monthly that went straight to the shelter's needs. The hotel manager where Marcus worked security confirmed he never missed a shift, despite often looking exhausted. "He sends half his paycheck to Detroit," the manager shared, something about helping his sister with college tuition for her kids. Through careful investigation, Sarah discovered Marcus had sold his own condo 2 years ago, moving into the shelter to cut expenses. His personal bank statement showed regular withdrawals for veteran medical supplies, food runs, and utility bills for the warehouse. A visit to his former neighbors revealed more. He'd bring veterans to dinner sometimes. Mrs. Rodriguez from Unit 4B explained, said everyone deserves a home-cooked meal. When the building sold, he gave away all his furniture to families who needed it. The shelter's power bills concerned Sarah most. They were astronomical for a warehouse this size. The ancient heating system struggled during winter months, forcing Marcus to choose between warmth and food some weeks. Local restaurant owners shared stories of Marcus's persistence. He'd arranged deals for leftover food, organized meal donations, and even learned basic kitchen skills to stretch their resources further. Every cent went to his mission. His dedication had ripple effects. Several veterans had found jobs through his connections. Others reunited with families after getting clean through the shelter's support groups. Marcus handled their successes like their struggles, with quiet dignity and unwavering support. But the system was fragile. Without proper permits or funding, the shelter operated on borrowed time. Health inspectors could shut them down. Fire codes weren't met. The building itself needed crucial repairs. Sarah watched Marcus through her car window one evening, noting how he gave his own dinner to a newcomer. She remembered the boy who'd once shared his lunch with her every day in high school, never mentioning that he often went hungry himself. The judge in her saw the legal precariousness of his situation. But the woman who'd known his heart saw something else. A mission that deserved more than survival on the margins. It was time to build something lasting from his sacrifice. Sarah leveraged her connections quietly but effectively. A former law school classmate specializing in nonprofit registration cleared his schedule, helping Marcus file proper paperwork for 501(3) status. Her brother, an electrical contractor, brought his team on a Sunday. They rewired the warehouse to code, installing efficient heating and cooling systems. The power bills dropped by 60% the following month. A real estate developer who'd appeared in her courtroom offered reduced rent with a 5-year lease option. His own father had been a Vietnam veteran, and Marcus's mission touched a personal chord. Sarah organized meetings between Marcus and experienced grant writers. His military records and success stories provided compelling evidence for funding applications. The local VA office, previously unaware of his informal network, began referring veterans to him. Local businesses responded to the shelter's legitimate status. A grocery chain offered weekly donations. A medical clinic provided free checkups. The community college developed a veteran-specific job training program. Throughout the process, Sarah maintained professional distance. She coordinated through intermediaries, ensuring their past connection wouldn't compromise the shelter's future. Marcus understood, communicating through proper channels while his dream took legal shape. The transformation happened systematically. Health and safety violations were addressed. Proper insurance coverage was secured. Staff positions were created for counseling and administration. Though Marcus insisted on keeping his security job. To stay grounded, he said. One evening, as Sarah drove past, she saw Marcus teaching younger veterans about grant proposals and budgets. The same patient teaching style, but now focused on sustaining their shared mission. Their eyes met briefly through the window, sharing a moment of quiet pride in how far they'd come. The warehouse now bore a professional sign, Second Chance Veterans Home. Inside, Hope had found a permanent address. The local media caught wind of Marcus's story after the case dismissal. The Miami Herald ran a front-page feature, From Battlefield to Home Front, How One Veteran's Mission Changed Lives. The coverage sparked interest nationwide. A morning show interviewed Marcus, his humble demeanor touching viewers' hearts. He redirected every question about his sacrifice to spotlight his residents' courage instead. Veterans from across Florida sought refuge at Second Chance. Marcus's model of peer support and practical help resonated with military families. State officials studied his program for wider implementation. The theft charges became a footnote in a larger narrative. Marcus's public defender shared how rare it was to see a courtroom full of character witnesses genuinely eager to testify. The prosecutor later volunteered legal services to the shelter. Sarah watched the media attention from afar. During one broadcast, she noticed Marcus wearing the same watch she'd given him for graduation. Some things, like his integrity, remained constant through all the years. Professional athletes who'd heard his story of giving up a basketball scholarship visited the shelter. They brought supplies, funding, and media attention that helped secure the shelter's future. Marcus handled the publicity with characteristic grace. Each interview emphasized the importance of community support and understanding veterans' needs. His story inspired similar initiatives in other cities. The final news piece showed Marcus and a group of veterans breaking ground for a shelter expansion. Sarah recognized his smile, not the broad grin of their youth, but the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd found his true calling. 1 year after the media spotlight, Second Chance Veterans Home thrived as a model facility. The expanded building housed 50 veterans, with comprehensive support services and a 70% success rate in permanent housing placement. Sarah joined the advisory board under her married name, contributing legal expertise while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Her quarterly visits showed the shelter's evolution from survival to sustainability. Marcus developed a training program for other veteran-led initiatives, sharing his experience while learning from others. His office walls displayed photos of successful graduates, men and women who'd found their own second chances. The shelter's kitchen now hosted culinary training programs. The computer lab offered certification courses. A dedicated mental health wing provided crucial support. Every addition reflected Marcus's understanding of veterans' needs. During a board meeting, Sarah watched Marcus mentor a young veteran interested in shelter management. His trademark patience now guided a new generation of service leaders. Their shared past had become a bridge to others' futures. The old warehouse had transformed into a beacon of hope. Sarah's legal network and Marcus's heart for service created something neither could have achieved alone. Their teenage dreams of changing the world had come true, just not in the way they'd imagined. Local judges now referred veterans to Second Chance instead of jail. Marcus's program demonstrated how understanding and support could transform lives. The shelter's success sparked similar initiatives across the state. On Christmas Eve, as Miami's warm breeze rustled palm trees, both Sarah and Marcus understood that their unexpected reunion had served a purpose greater than themselves. Their past had built a foundation for countless futures.